Okay, I'm gonna de-stand because I'm a bit of a moving figure here. But our topic of discussion in Group A was kind of the implications on liberal democracy that are posed by artificial intelligence, and not just pertaining to LLMs, but also more generative AI and different things as well. And I think to summarize the discussions that we were having, it can be summarized into three different silos. So the first one is diligence. So we were kind of having discussion about how with AI, there's kind of a rapid integration and rapid development on what the newest technology is. And if there's anything that we know about governments is that they're slow and bureaucratic and not agile in any capacity whatsoever. So I think if we want to maintain liberal democracies in some capacity and kind of stay ahead of government overreach within the sectors of AI, we need to continue innovating and creating new technology through diligence and staying up to date on what's new. But that also kind of falls on us. And I think if I can tie that a little bit into what's going on in Canada, is the biggest problem we have in Canada is that we are very comfortable. And I think with this new generation of AI adoption, being comfortable is the thing that is going to see you get left behind. And I think that what we need to focus on, again, is staying diligent, and how that actually ties into democracy is stuff that Joanna Barron was talking about last night, is the lack of diligence that Canadians have in paying attention to their own democracy has seen those freedoms slip away from them. Not to kind of self-promote, but the IFL, the group that I am the vice president of, we had Joanna at an event in September. And in our group are some of the top young leaders in Canada in their respective fields. And when she was demonstrating some of the government overreaches that were, present in the country, they were mind blown, honestly. Like, they had heard about the Freedom Convoy, but they didn't really know the government's overreach in those different areas. And if we're not diligent in the capacity of AI and what the government idea of how it should be implemented and monitored are, then we're also going to be in that same position where we're sitting in a room and we're hearing about it after it's already happened. And we're going to rely on someone like Joanna to save our butts again. So that's definitely not something that we want to be reliant on. We need to be always ahead of the curve. When it comes to implementing that globally into countries that already have highly restrictive, oppressive regimes, it's how do we create this open source network that provides access to people through VPNs or whatever their node of access is to these technologies, that they can stay ahead of government censorship, that they can stay ahead of technological repression in these different countries. So I think diligence is a very important thing, and that ties into the next kind of pillar that we've discussed, which is education. So this does start with you ultimately. And I think, again, not to be redundant, but ties into diligence, because diligence is an aspect of individual agency. And so at first, the education piece starts with you. Stefano, my colleague, was talking about how when it comes to, developing a culture and how do we have it so we have a general culture in a country that's able to be progressive and moving forward, it starts, in Christianity, we call it the Amoris Dei. So there's a kind of hierarchy to the things that you love, and that starts at home, and it goes to your community, then it goes to your country, Imago Dei, sorry. And basically, to tie that into the education piece, you have to start with yourself. So it is incumbent on you to learn about how to effectively use these technologies. Once you've grounded yourself in that thing, and you don't have to be an expert, I'm someone that works with AI. I am a software entrepreneur by day, and I'm very involved in that scene. I go to more tech conferences than I'd like to admit, but even I'm not an expert, and I don't think anyone will be an expert, and that's where you kind of involve the community of educating people as well. But it is, again, incumbent on you to be educated. So how do we use AI? Well, there was an interesting MIT study that came out that had two kind of focus groups. And the first group saw a decline in their IQs, while the other group saw an increase in their IQs. And the findings were that basically if you didn't have a architecture of how you wanted to use the AI going into it, you became less intelligent because you were relying on the AI to think for you. You were relying on the AI to create the solution and also create the problem. You maybe had an idea what the problem was, but to create that architecture of the problem was dependent on the AI. Whereas people that came in with the architecture for the problem, that were saying, here are my assumptions and what I think the answer might be, what is your thought? And really it ties back to the scientific method, right? Like, what is the scientific method? You start with a hypothesis, you do a test, and you come to a conclusion. And that is kind of how you have to use AI. So the first piece of education is, how do we use AI? The second piece is, what is AI? So there's multiple different types of AI, right? There's LLMs, and soon there's going to be robots that are sweeping our floors and serving us meals, right? So there's different kinds of AI. So what are they? From a professional perspective, what are the types of AIs that you can exploit to help benefit yourself, to help grow as an individual? And what are some cautionary tales, or what are some things we need to look at when looking at these different facets of AI that we can prepare ourselves for? And then again, what are organizations like these ones doing to spread the educational capacity of the local community and to the country as a whole and internationally, to educate people on AI? So those are very important questions, and I think, again, to tie it all back, it starts with you. It starts with creating that educational infrastructure within yourself, and that way you are able to educate others, because anyone can stand on a stage like me and talk like a buffoon for 15 minutes, but whether you actually convince people or have any impact on those people whatsoever is depending on your understanding of the subject matter yourself. And also, showing compassion to people when you're having those conversations, because as Janet was talking about earlier, some of the older generation have a more difficult time coming to grips with what the heck's going on with AI. My grandfather was born in 1933. He saw a world war, televisions, mail, computers, everything, and now he has to contend with the fact that you can watch a video of John Schneider punching Mark Carney in the face. So that's a Blue Jays reference for anyone who didn't understand. And so the education component actually doesn't stop, and is very important. And I think the final component is authenticity. So this ties it all together, because how do we determine the authenticity of the information or the AI? Oh, 2 minutes. I actually somehow got 50 minutes. Hey, perfect. And so how do we determine that authenticity? So again, it ties to diligence and it ties to education, but it also comes to creating an open source model. Now, the interesting thing about open source nature, and just to kind of side tangent for a little bit, as an entrepreneur, is there really any more intellectual property if everything is developed in an open source format? Who knows? But to bring that back is that to see where these information points are coming from is really important. To have digital sovereignty, so that not all your information is coming from AI models that are coming out of the United States, is important. And to authenticate the stuff that you're learning, like just to tie in what we were talking about earlier, when you went to Wikipedia back in the day, you would not be allowed to cite Wikipedia on a paper. You had to use Wikipedia as kind of a glossary of different things that you could find out, but then you had to dig into the sources. So to tie it all with a nice little bow, I think the three important things that we discussed, and that are, going to be the principles and actions that we can take to maintain liberal democracy in the age of AI adaptation, are diligence, authenticity, and education. Thank you.